So I think a lot of us can admit that one way or another we do have guilty pleasure bands, and for this video this will be another top 5 video, and this will be my top 5 guilty pleasure bands. And just some bands that, I wouldn't really be comfortable going out and saying that I like listening to them. Now there's a few things to keep in mind about this list. For one, it's in no particular order, and two, I do not like everything that these bands do, and also keep in mind that I don't really listen to my guilty pleasures that much. And also remember that this guilty pleasure list is going to be mainly rock and metal, because I know even with some metalheads they might have some guilty pleasures that are in the pop genre. But for me, it's still mostly metal and rock, so keep that in mind as well, although one of the artists on this list is actually not rock or metal. Hold up, just fasten your seatbelts. So yeah, we'll get into it, don't worry. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started, and I think we'll start things off with the most recent guilty pleasure band, which is the Amity Affliction. Now some of you guys actually might be surprised that I did give these guys a go. Not to say that I'm super impressed with their music, but they are a guilty pleasure band, but they're not really a band that I would really go out and say that I like listening to them, especially to the metal community, because they might think that, you really don't have the greatest exploration in the metal genre. And I think they are a newer metalcore band, which is kind of surprising to why I've been listening to them as a guilty pleasure. But I think one of the reasons why I do like listening to them is because this sounds like a band that I would have really been heavily into back in 2015, which was my first year of college, and was really the year when I first got really heavily into metalcore. I know that's later in life than others, but whatever, right? But yeah, out of all the songs I have heard from the Amity Affliction, I would say Pittsburgh is my favorite, but that can't be a coincidence, right? But yeah, I can't say that I want to listen to these guys too much, but I consider them a guilty pleasure. Alright, so next band up, we got Dead by April. Now, I've actually known about Dead by April for several years now. I guess you can kind of consider them one of the first heavier bands I've gotten into. They're kind of like pop metal. I don't know if that's the name of a real subgenre, but if it was, I think Dead by April would be in that category. Yeah, the clean vocals in Dead by April are very boy band-ish, and their music is rather edgy, and the lyrics are very much about love and loss. So yeah, definitely not the most mature approach when it comes to this band's music and lyrical content. But I will listen to them as a guilty pleasure and maybe to some nostalgia to somewhat of an extent. Now, I don't listen to Dead by April all the time. They're only a band that I'll listen to occasionally, and it's very so often that I listen to them. Obviously, I don't listen to them as much now as I once did. But yeah, I would say that Dead by April is a guilty pleasure. So let's go ahead and move on to the next artist, and this is actually the artist that isn't rock or metal, and that is the band Pendulum, if that's how you pronounce their name. Now, as you guys may know, maybe you guys don't know, but I do like some electronic music. But, when it comes to electronic music, it's something that I'm very picky with. It can't be too, upbeat, and, it can't be too poppy or anything. Most of the electronic music that I like usually has to have, a darker atmosphere to it. And, usually when someone asks me, what do I listen to besides metal and rock? I'll usually just say electronic because, well, I do like a few electronic artists. Pendulum happens to be one of my favorites. Once again, I don't like everything that this band does, mainly because a lot of their songs are very dubstep, and if you know me well enough, dubstep is nowhere near my thing. But I do like the songs where, I think his name is Rob, where he sings. I do like his voice, and I know that In Flames have actually featured with this group, so I found that pretty interesting as well. Yeah, I would recommend Pendulum if you're looking for good electronic artists, but once again, I don't think all their material is all that great, but I do like a good chunk of their material. Don't get me wrong. And I would consider them a guilty pleasure, and that's why I really don't talk about them on the channel that much. Because it's very so often I listen to electronic music. I really don't listen to electronic all that much. But, you know, I kind of like these guys for what they do. Alright, so next artist up, we got 3 Days Grace. Now, I know there might be some debates on whether or not 3 Days Grace deserves to be considered a guilty pleasure band, because I know there's some people that are just willing to admit that they do like this band. I can understand that a little bit, but there's things about 3 Days Grace that kind of make me feel like they should be a guilty pleasure. Mainly because they are modern rock, and a lot of modern rock is very edgy, especially their style and their lyrical content. Their lyrics are also mainly about love and loss, and things of that nature. And yeah, I know that 3 Days Grace and Breaking Benjamin have gotten comparisons a lot, because I know 3 Days Grace used to be a lot more popular back when I was in high school, but they're not so popular now, and I think that had to do with Adam being in the band at the time. And maybe some of you guys are wondering, why isn't Breaking Benjamin on the list then? Because I do think Breaking Benjamin has a more mature approach to their music than 3 Days Grace does. But you know what? I kind of like 3 Days Grace. Sure, some of their music is pretty edgy, and some of the lyrics are very uncreative sometimes. But, I think they're a good band for hard rock. Don't get me wrong. Alright, so the last band up. Now, if you know me well enough, you guys might know what the last band is on the list, and that is Coldplay. Now, some of you guys might not even know that I've even had a history with Coldplay. Yeah, I have had a history with Coldplay. Oftentimes when I do listen to Coldplay these days, it is for the nostalgia factor and for guilty pleasure. And when I do go to listen to Coldplay, it's mainly their previous material. Like, I won't listen to anything past Viva La Vida, maybe other than a few songs, because I do think Viva La Vida was actually their last good album. You know what? I'll just go ahead and say that I don't think Coldplay is that bad of a band. Sure, they're not really the style of music that I listen to these days, but I think they're a good band for indie rock. And you know what? I'll go ahead and say it. I do have a softer spot for indie rock. I don't think all indie rock is bad. I kind of do have to force myself to explore different subgenres of metal and rock anyway, since those are the main two go-to genres for me. And of course electronic to somewhat of a degree. But I can find some indie rock to be tolerable, and Coldplay happened to be one of my favorites. Now, once again, I don't listen to Coldplay all the time. They're really only a band that I listen to occasionally. But I don't think they're a bad band, honestly. I do like their first album is kind of boring, but I do like albums 2, 3, and 4. I think those are great. Yeah, and I think even if you're someone who doesn't really like indie rock all that much, you should still have some sort of respect for Coldplay, personally. Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the biggest guilty pleasure bands of mine, so I had to put them on the list. Yeah, I do like listening to some Coldplay here and there. So there you go, guys. That is a list of my guilty pleasure bands. Let me know what you guys think, and what are some bands that you aren't so much willing to admit that you like, and what are some bands you would consider guilty pleasure? Please let me know, and thank you for watching. Have a nice day, and take care.